Always so good to see you right here on 5 Plus. It is an exciting time. I got to tell you, as an avid waterfowler myself, I look forward to this weekend more than any other week of the year. Duck season now open in the state of Arkansas. It's been open in our Oklahoma viewing area for a little bit. Nonetheless, a lot of folks out in the duck blind this morning. When it all comes down to it, weather plays such a pivotal role, and you can imagine that's a lot why I really love talking about ducks and weather. But we have somewhat of an expert, a waterfowl ecologist and wetlands ecologist on with us today. This is Dr. Michael Schummer. He is in New York as an associate professor who has spent a lot of time here in the Deep South as well in his career, tracking ducks, tracking weather, and how all of that influences migration, inevitably impacting how successful we are or aren't into the duck blind. Talking today about the Weather Severity Index, the WSI. That's a product of Dr. Schummer here that looks at all of the different weather elements around the country and what pressures that may put on birds to actually migrate. Dr. Mike, tell me about your duck season first. It's wrapping up there where you're at. Have you had some luck?
Yeah, it's been good. I mean, we had a really good production this year in our area. We had near record warm during the summer, but also reasonable precipitation, which filled up our wetlands and fed our ducklings. And our opener was fantastic in this part of the world. And I do want to point out, you did throw me under the bus there a little bit by saying I'm from New York when we're talking to folks from Arkansas.
We love you.
Have spent and there are rural places in New York, and we've got some refuges, and we're in the Finger Lakes region, and it's a very duck-rich portion of the East Coast. So it's been good. We did a trip to North Dakota as well with my wife. My wife works for Ducks Unlimited, and so we're kind of a very ducky family. And then a couple good friends, and filled trucks up with dogs, and had some good shoots out in North Dakota as well. And back here now, and the rut's been going. We've been chasing bucks, and our season will open back up in early December and then run through early January, which sounds kind of weird for folks from the South, but given how warm we've been over recent years, we've really stepped that season back, and we've got a lot of good mallard and diving duck shooting and Canada geese late into that season.
So before we dive into looking forward into what this season may hold for Oklahoma and Arkansas, our viewers here, let's go back into this spring. We get this annual survey. They call it the BPOP, Breeding Population Survey, that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service does in collaboration with their counterparts in Canada. We saw some positive signs in there. Overall, duck numbers are still lower than they have been compared to the long-term average, but maybe there was some success, especially with the mallard count was a little bit higher, still within the margin of error, but still a little bit higher. Is there any one thing you might associate that with as it relates to wetlands and even the weather pattern that we've had over the last year or so?
Well, the prairies did get wet late, right? And so the duck numbers kind of just hung on, but I think production was really good this year. And so, you know, fall flight wise, the ducks coming south numbers wise compared to last year when the prairies were really, really dry all summer should be a lot better. And also juvenile ducks are pretty naive, so they decoy easier and create, you know, a little better experience for a lot of hunters. Adult ducks that have seen everything kind of know where to go hide, right? And they figure it out pretty quick.
An adult duck that's been shot at gets smart pretty quick, huh?
Oh yeah, and that, I mean, we can dig into that in the Fowl Weather podcast and why it works and such, but, you know, we always say, you know, fresh ducks hot from the north, because those birds, when they first show up on these weather patterns that push them south, they're still trying to figure out the landscape and where is safe and where is not, where blinds are, where blinds are not, and so the hunting can be really good on those days, and so that's through the Fowl Weather podcast kind of what we predict. But looping back to the prairies real quick, I mean, we've already got snow this year, and we actually have a little bit of Canadian prairie snow. It's only in the inches, but we're really looking forward to the potential for a really good snowfall up there this year with kind of the weather patterns that are happening, and that might just reboot these duck populations. Duck populations, Scott, go like this. I was taught this a long time ago. Instant ducks just add water. So it's all about the weather.
It's all about the weather. It's all about water. And, you know, I get excited about the fronts that we've got this weekend, and looking into the medium range data, it looks like maybe us here in the South are going to benefit from some good cold outbreaks. But What worries me more than anything is the year-long drought on the prairie and the impact that's going to continue to have. We know these things are cyclical. But you start talking about the farming practice changes up in the prairie pothole region. That's where these ducks breed every year. That's when they're done down here in the south with their winter, they fly back up there to make babies. And when we're talking about habitat degradation and habitat loss and the fact that it's been so dry and there's not habitat for them, it gives me some concern. What is it going to take to turn that around?
I always say we're like one blizzard away from fixing it. But the situation is that the soil conditions for a long time were very dry. What happened is we went into this winter with reasonable soil moisture. It did get dry. Like when I was up there, those were dry days and it was warm. I mean, we were trying to duck hunt in the 70s in North Dakota, right? And so the soil dried out a little bit, but the soil moisture is better than what it was. And what we need is a really hard freeze to hold that soil moisture in, so that when that snow melts, you know where it goes? It doesn't just go into the soil. It just doesn't disappear. It actually flows off that landscape and it goes into those potholes. Yep. It goes into those temporary wetlands that mallards and other ducks do so well with. And it's amazing how quickly that stuff reboots, right? When those basins that were dry for years get wet again, the bugs, the invertebrates just bloom like crazy, and ducklings just love it. That's the food, right? We think about, I mean, I always ask people, I'm like, what do ducks eat? They're like, corn, bread, popcorn. I'm like, well, all those are kind of corn and wheat products. But the reality is there's a ton of natural stuff they eat, and what hens need and ducklings need are bugs. And those prairies are a system that goes dry, and then they get wet again. And when they get wet, they get a bumper crop of bugs. And when they're wet for too long, they actually decline in their quality. So they can't stay wet forever. We just can't have tons of water on that prairie landscape and just have a giant flight of ducks. It doesn't happen like that. These duck populations are cyclical based on that water cycle.
All right, so that's a big overview of the long-range trends, kind of where we've been coming from and where we might be headed, and where our hopes lie that we can really recharge that soil there in the prairie potholes. But now let's talk about this duck season. It's finally here. Boy, I have felt like a kid leading up to Christmas for the last week or so. Finally here out there. Got a big cold blast of air here in Arkansas, middle part of this week, starting to warm up this weekend, seeing some signs in the long range that maybe there's going to be another good surge of some of that Canadian cold air spilling down into the lower 48. We know ducks like to fly south in the winter, but they don't necessarily do it just with that first cold front. In your studies, what have you learned are those factors that are really going to influence migration south?
Yeah, that's great, and thanks for that lead in. We started this work back a little after 2005 when I was at Mississippi State University. I was there in 2008, but 2005 was kind of like this low period, just like we're in now for mallard numbers. And the question was, hey, is this about mallard numbers and why ducks aren't showing up in the Mississippi Alluvial Valley in the south, or is it about weather, and has the weather changed as interpreted by a duck? And we went to the literature, and we couldn't really find a lot of talk, a lot of description about what causes ducks to move, but no specific numbers. So the first thing we had to do was kind of figure out what weather affects mallard. And when we say duck in Arkansas, we mean mallards, right?
Right.
I mean, there are other birds, and I greatly appreciate that, but mallard shooting in Arkansas is, my goodness, it's a thing more so than anywhere else. So we really focused on mallards first, and so we looked to Missouri, who had good waterfowl survey data. And we paired that with all different combinations of weather data to determine what was causing increases in ducks and decreases in ducks, right? And so what we found was that what best predicted that rate of change, or how quickly the increase in ducks happened and how quickly that decrease happened, was how cold was it, how much snow was on the ground, how many days in a row had it been below freezing, and how many days in a row had there been like measurable snow, which would interfere with like field feeding. Like if there's too much snow in a field, a mallard can't get to it. So it's really that cumulative effect of weather that does a pretty good job of predicting it, like this large scale, these movement of ducks.
So these mallards, they're not going to just take flight south at the first time that cold front and it gets a little chilly in the morning. Their whole objective is to stay where they can go back and make babies in the spring. So it's going to take some compounding of these weather elements before they finally say, okay, you know what? I don't have a habitat. I can't eat anymore. I finally got to go south. They're going to try to withstand some of those cooler temperatures initially. So it takes a lot, right?
Yeah, and they're a big animal, right? They're a big duck. They're not a Canada goose, but they're bigger than most of the other ducks that dabble around in wetlands. And they're generalists too, right? They'll land in fields and feed. They'll feed in wetlands. They'll hang out in rivers until their fat deposits, that they're using to keep warm. They're burning their fat until those get too low, and they make this decision. They're like, "Oh, I better get out of Dodge here. This is getting rough." And I think you made a really good point that a lot of people seem to forget about. The only place these ducks are going is back north once the weather breaks. And there's risk in every single one of these jumps they make. They're leaving a place they know with safe places and food resources that they've learned, and then flying to someplace that, if they're adults, then they kind of know it from last year, but it changes each year, right?
Sure.
And so the best bet is to stay as far north as long as you can, if you can. And so mallards very much hang on. I always talk about the wimpy ducks, right? And folks call them calendar ducks because most of the time when season opens in Arkansas, the weather's been severe enough for like the gadwall and the widgeon and the green-winged teal and all those other ones to make it to you. But the mallards don't always get there. And that's a big difference we see between mallards and kind of a lot of the other ducks, is those mallards really can hang north because they're a bigger duck and they're resourceful.
I'll be curious to hear from some hunters after this weekend as to what birds they did see and what birds they didn't see. And something tells me your point is going to be illustrated with maybe some lower mallard numbers, but some higher other numbers. I was down at one of the WMAs recently, and boy, it was littered with shovelers. But I saw a couple of mallards mixed in, but the numbers were somewhat low. Very, very lopsided out there. Okay, so we call this the WSI, Winter Severity or Weather Severity Index. It's a product you've been studying and putting together. How can we leverage your science, your information? How do we access it? And this is a point where you're going to plug one of my favorite podcasts. It's the Fowl Weather podcast. Tell us about what we can learn from that as we plan our hunts here.
Yeah, I'm the founder, along with my team, of the Fowl Weather podcast, and we really focus on informing people about waterfowl and wetland ecology. So there's always a good chunk of information on the front end of it. We try to make it about a half hour, so when you're in your truck on Monday morning or on your commute to work or wherever, you can pretty much digest this, as long as you're not somebody that lives like 10 minutes from your job or something. Or on the way to and from. And then we run all these algorithms across all the flyways, the Pacific, the Central, the Mississippi, and the Atlantic flyway, and we produce a prediction on the timing of migration based on the weather that is going to happen that week. So as opposed to all the reports that you get from other folks that are this is what we're seeing, that sometimes are a week or often 2 weeks late, we're actually predicting what's going to happen, where these ducks are going to be, days in advance. So as we like to say, you know where the ducks are at before the ducks know where they're at. So, which is, a fun tongue-in-cheek thing. But I tell you, I've used this a lot over the years. And last year I predicted 5 flight days for us locally. We have a refuge that we hunt nearby the home farm here. And it's about a half hour away. And 4 of those days hit. And so what we actually did is, we got on flight days, Scott. And so this predicted the movement of birds, say, in on a Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturday, say, when those places hunt. And my wife and I went out there and hunted, took our yellow labs out, and we're shooting ducks coming out of Ontario, Canada, before they've ever touched U.S. soil or water, right? That is cool stuff. And so that's what we're trying to do, is in people's really busy schedules, rather than just go hunt every day and disturb a place, like pick those best days to hunt, right? And focus on those flight days. And if you look back at any given season, the days you remember are where there were these clouds of birds coming out of the stratosphere and coming into your decoys, and you're like, where did these come from? Those are what we're predicting. We do predict the trickle movements as well, which happen kind of throughout the season. And every duck's different, too. We always say that, right? There's 6-point-some million plus mallards in the continent, and they're not all doing the same thing. So despite that there hasn't been weather, some mallards, behaviorally are different, and they're in the deep south already. And then some are going to try to live on the Missouri River in North Dakota until, you know what freezes over. So
Yeah,
they're different.
around here we often call them the Halloween mallards. There's just almost inevitably going to be a solid uptick in the greenhead count right around Halloween, like clockwork. But to your point, there's a whole other subset of their cousins that are like, you know what, we're going to hang back until we just absolutely got to fly south. And so there's some very interesting diversity even among that one species there and their habitats, and some wonderful studies could probably continue to be done on those. So you run these numbers, you put the podcast out. You told me this morning you were kind of running some numbers. What can you give us in terms of a preview of what's to come?
I am so happy because last year was such a mess, and we got a lot of listenership between Christmas and New Year's because everybody was like, where are the ducks? There were like 6 podcasts that came out that where are the ducks, and then where are the ducks part 2, and where are the ducks part 8? Because the ducks didn't show up. I mean, it was an El Nino year. It was very warm. It was very, very dry in the south, and this year is looking really good. We got a cold front coming this week. There's already snow into South Dakota and places there. I think it's snowing right now in Chicago, right? Like, I mean, wet snow, but snow. And then next week, if you look at Devil's Lake, North Dakota, they have low temperatures in the negatives, right?
Ooh.
This is gonna...
That'll freeze some holes up.
This is gonna make stuff move, yeah. So I think we've got, what we have is a better number of ducks in the south than we had last year at this time, in better water conditions because of some tropical systems in some places. I know you've been pretty dry, I think, in your part of Arkansas and in Oklahoma, until recently with some rains.
Right.
But we have better water conditions, so we've got places for ducks to stop. We've had a little better cold, and what's coming after this weekend is a really, really strong shot. I expect a pretty substantial movement in after kind of the weekend hunting is done. There should be a whole nother shift, and I'm not talking just early ducks. I'm talking mallards in general.
I get that impression
I think it's
too.
looking really good.
I get that impression when I look at some of those medium range forecasts. We're talking a good solid surge of some cold air right after Thanksgiving into that first week of December. And while there certainly are going to be some habitat challenges here locally, I just recall last year where I was sweating and swatting mosquitoes in the blind more than I was anything else. And so I hate to paint just a totally rosy picture, but I'll be honest, I'm optimistic from a weather perspective. We'll see what the bird count is in the end, but if weather's going to move these birds, it's very possible, I think, and it sounds like you're seeing something similar, that maybe late November, early December could be really good for us.
It's got to be better than last year, and if you think about it, is at least if you have good numbers of birds between Christmas and New Year's, when people have time off, I think that hits the buttons that folks are looking for, right? The Weather Severity Index has like these thresholds of values when the temperature and the snow cover, one or the other or in combination, get good enough or severe enough. I like severe weather, so
it's all about perspective, right?
Right. So, I mean, I just ran these numbers for like Des Moines, Iowa, like mid Iowa and such, and they're great enough there by late next week to even cause movement of mallards out of that area, right? So, declining numbers of mallards at the latitude of Iowa did not happen this early last year. So we were record warm in October, right? People remember that.
Yep.
But this has got going in a hurry, and I think we're going to move these ducks down to y'all without much trouble. I mean, is it a grand passage where everything locks up and we've got snow all the way to like mid-Missouri? No. But is it better than last year? Yeah, definitely.
I think that is all we can ask for. I don't have the stats in front of me, but I recall last year the Arkansas Game and Fish, they do 3 or 4 surveys via airplane to go out and estimate the number of birds on the landscape here in Arkansas. And it was either their December or their January, one of the two. One of their surveys was the lowest mallard count on record since they were flying those transects. And so to be looking at solid potential for at least a little bit of good movement early in the month compared to last year has me just very optimistic. Dr. Schummer, thank you so much. Plug that podcast one more time. Where can folks find it?
Yeah, it's the Fowl Weather podcast. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Podbeam. I mean, wherever you want to listen. And if you don't do any of those platforms, you can just go to foulweather.co and find us there. We have a lot of stuff on our webpage. There's actually a migration button you can click, which explains the Weather Severity Index. There's a whole entire video on there that explains the Weather Severity Index. We've thrown up some of our favorite recipes, and there's contact information there too. If anybody has any questions or wants to provide anecdotal input of what they're seeing, I mean, you can email me at drmike@foulweather.co as well. So that's a wrap. And you know, we're once a week, every Monday morning through the end of January, and then we go to about a once every 2 weeks during the off season. We do a lot of wetland management topics, waterfowl ecology, and a lot of topics that hunters have said, hey, this is some pretty cool stuff, and you break it down in an easily digestible manner, and that's our intent, is to entertain people and inform people and make the duck hunting experience just better all around for everybody out there.
I'm happy you mentioned the off-season topics. Those are actually among my favorite. Of course, in the season, getting that on Mondays and kind of getting an idea of what the next few weeks might hold is interesting. But in the off-season, when I'm just can't think about anything else but ducks, and it's you know, July outside and it's sweating and we have heat index of 102, it's fun to go onto that podcast and hear about ecology, wetland management, and how we can make our habitat here locally even better. And those are all topics you cover so well. Thank you so much for coming on. Best of luck as your season, I guess the first part comes to an end before it reopens back up. I'll do my best to get you back on here sometime, maybe let's say early January. We'll be about halfway through the season. We're going in on the closing half, and maybe you'll have good news for us then too.
Thank you, Scott.
All right, that's going to be a wrap for us here on this edition of 5 Outdoors. We'll see you next Saturday for an all-new edition of something ranging from biking, hunting, fishing, all of the things that make this area so great. In the meantime, y'all have a good weekend.